The war had been raging for years. The galaxy was burning under the brutal invasion of the jakar swarm, a merciless insectoid race that sought to consume everything in its path. Many planets fell, countless lives were lost, and the United Galactic Federation struggled to hold the line. Among the many worlds under attack was Virene 4, home to the elegant and intelligent Virene species. Their cities, once filled with towering spires and glowing rivers, were now reduced to rubble. The jakar moved like an unstoppable tide, tearing through defenses, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. Amidst the chaos, a small Virene child, Selara, ran through the crumbling streets. She was no more than 10 years old, her silver-blue skin covered in dust and bruises. Fear gripped her heart as she searched desperately for her parents, but there was no sign of them. Only wreckage and the monstrous forms of the jakar swarming through the ruins. She stumbled over a broken metal beam, falling hard onto the ground. Pain shot through her leg, and she bit her lip to stop from crying out. The jakar were close, too close. She could hear their chittering, the sound of their razor-sharp claws scraping against the stone. Her body froze in terror. Then, a voice rang out through the chaos. "Get down." A deafening explosion rocked the street as a grenade detonated, sending dust and debris flying. A figure leaped through the smoke, a human soldier clad in battle-worn armor. His face was hidden behind a cracked visor, his rifle glowing with heat. Without hesitation, he pulled the trigger, unleashing a volley of plasma rounds that tore through the advancing jakar. The creatures screeched and fell, their chitinous bodies twitching before going still. Selara could only stare in shock as the soldier turned to her. He was taller than any Virene she had seen before, his armor scratched and dented from battle. But his voice, though rough, carried warmth. "Are you hurt?" he asked, kneeling beside her. Selara blinked, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. Her leg ached, but she managed to shake her head. The soldier gave a sharp nod, then glanced at the burning city around them. "This place isn't safe. We need to move." She didn't know why, but she trusted him. Maybe it was the way he had appeared in her moment of need, or maybe it was the way he spoke, not with fear, but with determination. She reached for his outstretched hand, and he lifted her effortlessly, carrying her in one arm while holding his rifle in the other. They moved quickly through the ruined city, the sounds of battle echoing all around them. The human soldier, his name was Captain Ilias Voss, though she didn't know it yet, moved like a warrior who had seen 100 battles. He never hesitated, never wavered, even as more jakar appeared in their path. At one point, he set Selara down behind a broken transport vehicle. "Stay low," he instructed before stepping out into the open. The jakar screeched and rushed toward him, their mandibles snapping. Elias stood his ground, his rifle roaring as he cut them down with precise shots. But there were too many. A massive jakar warrior emerged from the ruins, its armored body towering over him. It let out a shrill, bone-chilling cry and lunged. Elias barely had time to react before the creature struck, sending him crashing against a collapsed building. His rifle clattered to the ground, just out of reach. Selara's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to scream, to run, but fear paralyzed her. The jakar warrior reared back, ready to deliver the final blow. Elias, dazed but not defeated, reached down and grabbed his combat knife. As the beast lunged, he rolled aside, barely avoiding its deadly claws. In one swift motion, he drove the blade into the creature's throat, twisting it with all his strength. The jakar let out a gurgling shriek before collapsing, its body twitching before going still. Breathing heavily, Elias retrieved his rifle and turned to Selara. "Time to go," he said, as if nothing had happened. They ran again, weaving through the ruins, until finally they'd reached the last evacuation point, a heavily guarded Federation transport preparing for takeoff. Soldiers waved them forward as the engines roared to life. Elias handed Selara to one of the medics. "Get her on board," he ordered. The medic nodded, guiding her up the ramp, but just before she stepped inside, Sailora turned back. She had so many questions. Who was this human? Why had he saved her? Would she ever see him again? But before she could say anything, another explosion rocked the ground. Elias turned toward the battle, his rifle raised. He didn't look back. And then the transport's doors closed. As the ship lifted off, Sailora pressed her hands against the glass, watching as the brave human disappeared into the flames below. She never even got to say thank you. But she would never forget him. Not now. Not ever. And someday, somehow, she would find him again. Years had passed since the war ended, but the memories never faded. Sailora had grown into a respected diplomat for the United Galactic Federation, a powerful alliance of species working to maintain peace in the galaxy. She had dedicated her life to ensuring that tragedies like the Jakar War never happened again. Yet, despite all her achievements, there was one thing that still haunted her: the human who had saved her life. Captain Elias Voss. She had never forgotten his face, his voice, or the way he had fought against impossible odds to protect her. He was the reason she was still alive, the reason she had the chance to change the future. But after the war, he had vanished. For years, she searched. She went through every old war record, spoke to veterans, and followed every lead. But each time, she hit a dead end. Some said he had died in the war. Others claimed he had left the military and disappeared into the vast galaxy. But Sailora refused to believe he was gone. One evening, in the towering Federation capital of Orvan Prime, she sat in her private study, scrolling through old military reports. The room was dimly lit, the glow of her holoscreen reflecting off her silver-blue skin. She had spent countless nights like this, searching for a ghost lost in history. Then she saw something. A declassified war file, one she hadn't seen before. It listed the final assignments of human soldiers after the war's end. Her breath caught in her throat as she read the words. Captain Elias Voss. Last recorded location, Farside Station, Outer Rim. Her hands trembled as she stared at the screen. He was alive. Without hesitation, she activated her communicator. Prepare my ship, she commanded. I leave for the Outer Rim at first light. The journey to the unknown. The Outer Rim was a lawless frontier, a place where former soldiers, mercenaries, and criminals vanished from the eyes of the civilized world. It was a place where no one asked questions, and past lives were buried. Sailora's ship, the Starwind, dropped out of hyperspace near Farside Station, a rundown outpost orbiting a dying planet. The station was old and rusted, a shadow of the once great Federation influence. As she stepped out of her ship, the air was thick with the scent of oil, metal, and distant smoke. The docking bay was filled with all kinds of people, smugglers, bounty hunters, and ex-soldiers trying to escape their past. Sailora adjusted her diplomat's robes and walked forward with purpose. If Elias Voss was here, she would find him. The search begins. She moved through the crowded station, scanning every face, looking for any sign of the man who had saved her. She questioned traders, barkeepers, and station workers, but most just shrugged or gave vague answers. Finally, she found an old human mechanic sitting outside a repair shop. His gray beard and tired eyes told her he had seen more than his share of war. She approached him. I'm looking for someone, she said. A human soldier. Elias Voss. The old man's hands froze over the engine part he was fixing. He looked up at her, studying her face. Why are you looking for him? Sailora hesitated. He saved my life once. I need to find him. The old man sighed. You're not the first to come looking. But Elias, he ain't the man he used to be. Her heart pounded. He's alive. He's alive, the mechanic said. But he don't go by that name anymore. You'll find him at the Rusthound Bar, if he wants to be found. A forgotten warrior. The Rusthound Bar was a dark, quiet place on the far side of the station. The air smelled of cheap drinks and old regrets. Sailora stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room. And then she saw him. At a corner table, hunched over a glass of something strong, sat Elias Voss. But he was different. The man she remembered had been a proud soldier, standing tall against the horrors of war. The man before her now was older, his beard unshaven, his once strong posture weighed down by years of isolation. His armor was gone, replaced by a simple worker's vest and worn-out boots. Her breath caught in her throat. She had imagined this moment for years, but now that she was here, words failed her. Slowly, she stepped forward. Elias. He didn't react at first, as if the name meant nothing to him. Then, slowly, he turned his head, his eyes locking onto hers. For a long moment, he just stared. Recognition flickered in his tired eyes. But there was something else, something deeper. Regret. "It's been a long time, kid," he finally said, his voice rough and quiet. Sailora swallowed hard. She had found him. After all these years, she had finally found him. But the man who had once saved her no longer believed he was a hero. Sailora stood frozen. After years of searching, after countless dead ends, she had finally found Elias Voss. But he wasn't the man she remembered. The fearless soldier who had once saved her from the horrors of war was now a shadow of his former self. His once proud stance was slouched, his sharp eyes dulled by years of solitude. His beard was unkempt, and the scars on his arms hinted at battles long past. He took a slow sip from his drink, barely looking at her. "Didn't think I'd see a Varine here," he muttered. His voice was deep but weary, as if carrying the weight of a forgotten past. "And I sure didn't expect it to be you." Sailora stepped closer, her silver-blue skin glowing faintly under the dim lights of the Rusttown bar. "I've been looking for you," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Elias let out a tired chuckle. "That's so." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "What for? War's over. You're alive. That's all that matters." Sailora clenched her fists. "No, it's not all that matters." She took a deep breath. "I never got to thank you. You saved my life, Elias. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you." He looked away, as if trying to avoid the weight of her words. "I was just doing my job," he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. Sailora shook her head. "No, you didn't just do your job. You risked everything for a scared child you didn't even know. You fought until the last moment. And then, you disappeared." Elias exhaled sharply and rubbed a hand over his face. "And what, you tracked me all these years just to say thanks?" She hesitated. "No," she admitted. "I need to understand why you left. Why you walked away from everything." Elias went quiet. For a long moment, the only sound between them was the low hum of the bar and the quiet murmurs of the other patrons. Finally, he spoke. "I stayed in the war longer than I should have," he said. "Kept fighting. Kept losing people. You think I saved you, but I lost hundreds just like you. People who were counting on me." His fingers tightened around his glass. "One day, I realized I wasn't saving anyone anymore, just surviving. So I walked away." Sailora's heart ached at his words. She could see the pain in his eyes, the burden he had carried alone for so long. "But you did save someone," she said softly. "You saved me." Elias didn't respond. He only stared down at his drink, lost in memories. "The offer." Sailora sat across from him, refusing to let the conversation end there. "You disappeared," she said, her voice firmer now. "But the galaxy still remembers. Do you know how many stories are told about Captain Elias Voss?" He scoffed. "Stories don't mean much." "They mean everything," she countered, "because they're proof that you mattered, that what you did mattered." Elias sighed. "And what do you want me to do about it?" Sailora leaned forward. "Come with me," she said. "Help me bring order to the Outer Rim. There are still people out here who need someone like you." Elias laughed, but there was no joy in it. "I'm no hero, kid." "I don't need a hero," she said. "I need you." For the first time since she arrived, Elias looked her in the eyes, and for a brief moment, something flickered in his gaze, something she hadn't seen before. Hope. A dangerous past. Before he could respond, the doors of the Rusthound bar slid open with a loud hiss. Celera turned just in time to see 3 heavily armed men step inside. Their armor was mismatched, their weapons worn but deadly. Mercenaries, and they were looking straight at Elias. "Voss," the leader growled, stepping forward. "We got unfinished business." Elias sighed, setting down his drink. "Figures." Celera tensed. "Friends of yours?" Elias stood up slowly. "Not exactly." The mercenary leader smirked. "You cost us a lot of credits when you walked away from your last job." He pulled out a plasma pistol, aiming it at Elias. Time to settle the debt. Celera's instincts kicked in. Without thinking, she reached for the small energy dagger hidden in her robes. But before she could act, Elias moved. Faster than she thought possible, he grabbed the mercenary's wrist, twisting it sharply. The pistol fired into the ceiling, sending sparks flying. In one fluid motion, Elias slammed the man's head into the table, knocking him out cold. The other 2 mercenaries reacted instantly, drawing their weapons. But Elias was already on the move. He grabbed a chair and hurled it at one, knocking the gun from his hands. Then, with a swift kick, he sent the other sprawling to the ground. Before either could recover, he grabbed a fallen pistol and aimed it between them. "Walk away," he said calmly. The mercenaries hesitated, then scrambled to grab their unconscious leader and ran. Celera stared at Elias in shock. The way he moved, the way he fought, it was like watching the legend of Captain Elias Voss come to life. He sighed and tossed the pistol onto the table. "Guess I still remember a thing or two." Celera smiled. "Then maybe you're not as lost as you think." Elias looked at her, and this time, he didn't turn away. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't done fighting after all. The Rusthound bar was silent. The few remaining patrons stared at Elias and Celera, their drinks forgotten. The mercenaries who had stormed in just minutes ago were now gone, either unconscious or running for their lives. Elias let out a breath and rubbed his temples. "I knew trouble would find me sooner or later," he muttered. Celera folded her arms. "Looks like your past isn't done with you yet." Elias shot her a tired look. "Yeah, well, neither are you, apparently." Celera smirked. "Nope." She motioned toward the exit. "Come on. We can't stay here." Elias hesitated, glancing at his half-empty drink. He had spent years trying to bury the past, to disappear into the shadows. But in just a few hours, Celera had dragged him right back into the light. And the truth was, he didn't hate it. With a sigh, he stood up. "All right, kid. Lead the way." A new path. The station's corridors were dimly lit, lined with flickering neon signs and walls covered in rust. The air smelled of oil and old machinery. It was a place where people hid, from the law, from enemies, and from themselves. Elias had once believed he could hide here forever, but Celera had found him. And now, others had too. As they walked, Celera kept glancing at him. "You're still fast," she said, "and strong." Elias smirked. "Did you think I just sat in a bar for 5 years?" "Well, yeah." He chuckled. "I keep busy. Work here and there. Keep in shape." Celera's expression turned serious. "Why not return to the Federation? The war is over, but we still need people like you." Elias's smile faded. He exhaled slowly, staring at the metal floor. "The war took everything from me, Celera. My friends, my team, my purpose." He paused. "And when it was over, no one needed me anymore." Celera stopped walking. She turned to face him, her violet eyes searching his. "That's not true," she said. "I needed you, and I still do." Elias looked at her for a long moment. There was no pity in her gaze, only understanding. He sighed. "What are you really here for, kid?" Celera hesitated. Then she pulled out a small data drive from her pocket and held it out. "Because I need your help." Elias frowned but took the drive. He tapped it against his wrist device, and a holographic map flickered to life. It showed a hidden planet, one not listed on any official charts. Around it, red markers blinked. Danger. Elias raised an eyebrow. "What am I looking at?" Sailor's voice was firm. "A secret jakar facility. One that shouldn't exist." Elias's grip on the device tightened. "The jakar are gone." "That's what we thought," Sailor said. "But 3 months ago, Federation scouts picked up distress signals from this region. At first, we thought it was just pirate activity." She gestured to the map. "But then we intercepted a transmission." She tapped her wrist device, and a distorted voice played. "Human interference. Must not repeat. War is not over." Elias's blood ran cold. The voice was unmistakable. The jakar. His mind flashed back to the war. The burning cities, the desperate battles, the countless soldiers lost fighting against an enemy that showed no mercy. "I need to go there," Sailor said. "And I need you to come with me." Elias stared at the map, his jaw clenched. Every part of him screamed to walk away, to let the past stay buried. But he couldn't. Not when the jakar were still out there. Not when Sailor needed him. He took a deep breath, then snapped the data drive shut. "When do we leave?" "Trouble finds them first." Before Sailor could answer, the station's warning sirens blared. The walls shook slightly, and a metallic voice echoed through the halls. "Alert! Unidentified ships approaching. All civilians are advised to evacuate." Elias and Sailor exchanged glances. "That can't be a coincidence," Elias muttered. Sailor nodded. "Come on, my ship's this way." They took off down the corridors, weaving through the crowds of panicked people. As they reached the docking bay, the massive station doors began to slide open, revealing the darkness of space. And then they saw them. 3 black warships, sleek and heavily armed, emerging from the void. Their crimson insignia was unmistakable. The jakar. Elias cursed under his breath. "Guess we don't have to go looking for them after all." Sailor tapped her communicator. "Starwind, prep for emergency departure." A robotic voice answered. "Engines warming. Estimated launch in 5 minutes." "We don't have 5 minutes," Elias growled. The warships opened fire. Red plasma bolts slammed into the station's defenses, causing explosions to ripple across the structure. The docking bay shook violently, and metal debris rained down. Elias grabbed Sailor's wrist and pulled her behind a cargo crate as another blast ripped through the hangar. Sailor drew her energy pistol. "Looks like we're fighting our way out." Elias grinned. "Just like old times." He picked up a discarded plasma rifle from a fallen security officer, checking the charge. Then, with the skill of a seasoned warrior, he stood and fired. A group of jakar soldiers had landed in the hangar, their armor gleaming under the emergency lights. Elias took down the first one with a precise shot, while Sailor blasted another. The battle had begun. As chaos erupted around them, Elias felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. He wasn't lost anymore. He had a fight. He had an enemy. And he had a reason to stand and fight once again. Blaster fire streaked across the docking bay as Elias and Sailor took cover behind a stack of metal crates. The jakar soldiers moved with precision, their dark armor reflecting the flashing emergency lights. They were here for a reason. This wasn't just a random attack. Elias gritted his teeth. He had fought these creatures before, had watched them slaughter entire colonies. He wasn't about to let them take another victory. Sailor peeked out and fired her energy pistol, striking a jakar in the chest. The soldier collapsed, but more were pushing forward, their heavy boots clanking against the metal floor. "We need to get to my ship," Sailor shouted over the noise. Elias nodded. "Cover me." He jumped out from cover, rolling forward and grabbing a fallen plasma rifle. In one smooth motion, he took aim and fired. hitting 2 jakar before they could react. Salara ran beside him, her shots precise and deadly. They weaved through the chaos, dodging incoming fire as the station shook under the assault from the warships outside. Finally, they'd reached Salara's ship, the Starwind. The sleek spacecraft sat at the edge of the hangar, its engines humming as it prepared for takeoff. The boarding ramp was down, but 2 jakar soldiers were standing in front of it, their weapons raised. Elias didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, slamming his rifle into the first jakar's head. The alien stumbled, but Elias was already moving. He spun around and delivered a powerful kick, sending the soldier crashing to the ground. The second jakar aimed at him, but before it could fire, Salara shot it down. "Go," she shouted. They rushed up the ramp just as another explosion rocked the station. The docking bay's emergency alarms wailed, and fire erupted from a nearby fuel tank. Elias slammed his fist against the control panel, closing the ramp behind them. "Get us out of here." Salara sprinted to the cockpit, sliding into the pilot's seat. "Hold on." The Starwind lifted off just as another plasma blast tore through the hangar, narrowly missing the ship. Elias strapped himself into the co-pilot's seat. "We've got 3 enemy warships out there. Think you can outfly them?" Salara smirked. "Watch me." A deadly chase. The Starwind shot out of the hangar, its thrusters blazing as it entered open space. The jakar warships were waiting, their heavy cannons already locking onto their target. Boom! A bright explosion erupted behind them as the station took another hit. "We can't take a direct hit from those cannons," Elias warned. Salara's hands flew over the controls. "Then we won't." She jerked the ship hard to the left, narrowly avoiding a plasma blast that would have ripped them apart. The Starwind spun between 2 enemy ships, using their own bulk to block their firing angles. Elias quickly checked the weapons system. "Shields at 40%. We've got 2 plasma cannons and 1 rear turret." "Then shoot back," Salara yelled. Elias didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed the controls and fired the ship's cannons, striking one of the enemy vessels. The blast wasn't enough to destroy it, but the ship shuddered as its shields absorbed the impact. The jakar fighters pursued them, unleashing a storm of plasma bolts. Salara twisted the ship, weaving through the incoming fire with expert precision. "We need an escape route," Elias shouted. Salara's eyes darted across the navigation screen. "There. A debris field from an old battle. We can lose them in there." Elias looked at the screen. The field was filled with twisted wreckage, the remains of an ancient battle between the Federation and the jakar. Flying through it was suicidal, but so was staying here. "Do it," Elias said. The Starwind plunged into the debris field, dodging massive chunks of metal and destroyed ships. The jakar fighters followed, but their heavier frames struggled to maneuver through the wreckage. Elias aimed the rear turret and fired, hitting one of the pursuing ships. It spun out of control, slamming into a floating battleship hull and exploding in a fiery burst. The second jakar fighter kept up, but just as it was about to fire, a large piece of wreckage drifted into its path. The pilot tried to avoid it, but the fighter clipped the metal, sending it spiraling away. Elias grinned. "That's 2 down." But the main warship was still behind them. Salara's hands tightened on the controls. "Hang on. This is gonna get rough." She pushed the engines to full power, dodging the last few debris chunks before bursting out of the field at top speed. The jakar warship hesitated, unwilling to follow them into open space without backup. Elias checked the sensors. "They're not following. We're clear." Salara let out a long breath, leaning back in her seat. That was too close. Elias exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "You always this reckless?" She smirked. "Only when I'm trying to impress someone." Elias chuckled, shaking his head. "Well, consider me impressed." A dark truth. With the immediate danger behind them, Salara set the ship on autopilot and turned to Elias. We need to talk. Elias nodded. Yeah, about that jakar base you mentioned. Sailora pulled up the holographic map again. It's located in an uncharted sector near the Dead Nebula. The Federation never found it because it's hidden inside a planetary storm. Elias crossed his arms. And you think the jakar are rebuilding there? Sailora's expression darkened. I think they never stopped. Elias felt a chill run down his spine. The war was supposed to be over. Humanity had won. But if the jakar were still out there, waiting, planning, then the war was far from finished. Sailora met his gaze. We have to stop them, Elias. Elias clenched his fists. The past he had tried so hard to escape had finally caught up with him. And this time, he wasn't running. He nodded. Then let's finish what we started. The Starwind soared through the vast emptiness of space, its engines humming softly as it headed toward the Dead Nebula. The destination ahead was nothing short of suicidal. A storm-covered planet where an old enemy had been hiding in the shadows, waiting to strike again. Elias sat in the co-pilot's seat, staring at the holographic map projected before him. Red markers flashed over a swirling gas cloud, the planetary storm that hid the jakar's secret base. This place looks like a death trap, Elias muttered. Sailora, her hands firm on the controls, smirked. Good thing we're not dead yet. Elias exhaled and leaned back, not for lack of trying. The dark truth. Sailora tapped the screen, zooming into the planet's surface. Federation intelligence picked up strange energy readings here. If the jakar are rebuilding, this is where we'll find proof. Elias folded his arms. And what if we do? Sailora's voice was firm. Then we warn the Federation. Before it's too late. Elias sighed. I have a feeling they won't listen. Sailora glanced at him. They will. Because we're going to bring them evidence. Elias frowned, rubbing his chin. He had spent years trying to forget the war, trying to escape the nightmares. But now he was heading straight into a fight he never wanted to face again. He turned to Sailora. What if this is bigger than we think? Sailora hesitated. Then we stop it, together, entering the storm. As the Starwind approached the planet, the storm came into view. The clouds were thick, flashing with violent energy discharges. The entire atmosphere was unstable, swirling with winds that could tear a ship apart. Elias gripped his seat. Tell me you have a plan. Sailora grinned. I do. She flicked a switch, and the ship's shields flared to life, adjusting for atmospheric pressure. The engines whined as she tilted the ship downward, entering the upper layers of the storm. Immediately, the ship shook violently. Lightning crackled outside, striking dangerously close. The wind pushed against them, making every second a struggle to maintain control. Elias checked the sensors. Shields down to 70%. We can't take too many hits. Sailora's hands tightened on the controls. Hold on. She angled the ship sharply, dodging a sudden energy surge. The screens flickered, but she kept pushing forward, breaking through the thick clouds. Then, suddenly, silence. The Starwind burst out of the storm into a clear sky. Below them, the planet's surface stretched endlessly, a barren wasteland covered in jagged rocks and deep canyons. And at the center of it all, a massive jakar facility, hidden beneath the storm. Elias's jaw tightened. So the rumors were true. Sailora's expression darkened. They'd never stopped. They've been preparing for something. The hidden base, the jakar facility, was massive, built into the canyon walls. Dark towers rose from the ground, their surfaces pulsing with a strange energy. Ships flew in and out, carrying supplies. Elias zoomed in on the scanner, analyzing the structures. That's a full-scale war base. This isn't just a hideout. They're building something big. Sailora's hands flew over the controls. Let's get closer. She guided the Starwind down toward the canyon, staying low to avoid detection. The closer they got, the more details became clear. rows of soldiers training, massive weapon stockpiles, and something even more disturbing. Elias's eyes widened. That's impossible. At the center of the facility, a partially constructed warship sat in a massive dock. A jakar dreadnought. Elias's stomach twisted. They're rebuilding their fleet. Sailora clenched her fists. If they finish that ship, they'll be unstoppable. Elias nodded. Then we can't let that happen. The plan. Sailora pulled the ship into a small canyon, landing it behind a ridge of rocks. She powered down the engines to avoid detection. Elias stood up, grabbing his gear. We go in, get the data, and get out. No unnecessary fights. Sailora smirked. Unnecessary. With the jakar. That's wishful thinking. Elias chuckled. Fair point. Sailora grabbed a small data drive. We'll hack into their systems, download everything we can, and send it to the Federation. If we can prove what they're planning, they'll have no choice but to act. Elias checked his weapons. Let's move. Into enemy territory. The two slipped out of the ship, moving quietly through the rocky terrain. The air was thick with the scent of burning fuel, and the distant hum of jakar patrol ships echoed through the canyon. Elias pressed against a rock as a jakar guard passed by, his armor gleaming under the dim light. The alien warrior paused, scanning the area. Sailora held her breath. Then the guard moved on. Elias exhaled slowly. Too close. They continued forward, using the shadows for cover. Soon, they reached a side entrance, a ventilation shaft leading into the facility. Sailora pried it open. This should take us straight to their command center. Elias smirked. Ladies first. Sailora rolled her eyes and climbed inside. Elias followed, sealing the hatch behind them. The truth revealed. They crawled through the vent, moving carefully. Below them, the base buzzed with activity. Jakar officers barking orders, engineers working on the dreadnought, weapons being transported. Then they reached their target. Peering through a grate, Elias saw a large control room filled with screens and consoles. At the center stood a jakar commander, his dark armor marked with high-ranking insignia. Sailora activated her wrist device, scanning the system. I'm in. Just need a few minutes. Elias kept watch, his pulse steady. But as Sailora worked, he saw something on the screen that made his blood turn cold. The dreadnought's launch countdown. Elias whispered, They're launching in 3 days. Sailora's fingers moved faster. Then we don't have much time. As the data finished downloading, Elias heard heavy footsteps outside the vent. Sailora looked at him. We got company. Elias clenched his jaw. So much for avoiding a fight. He gripped his weapon as the vent hatch was suddenly ripped open, and jakar soldiers stared right at them. Elias barely had a second to react. The jakar soldiers ripped open the vent cover, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. Sailora cursed under her breath. Time to go. Elias didn't hesitate. He kicked out, slamming his boot into the nearest soldier's face. The alien stumbled back, giving him just enough space to jump down into the control room. Sailora followed, landing beside him as alarms blared across the base. The jakar commander turned toward them, his reptilian eyes narrowing. Humans, he growled. You should not have come here. Elias smirked. Yeah, we get that a lot. The commander raised his clawed hand, signaling his troops. Kill them. A desperate fight. The soldiers charged forward, blasters firing. Elias and Sailora dived for cover, rolling behind a metal console as energy blasts sizzled through the air. Elias popped up, firing his plasma rifle. His shot struck a soldier's chest, sending him crashing to the ground. But more kept coming. Sailora hacked into the system with her wrist device, her fingers moving fast. Buy me some time. I'm sending the data to the Federation. Elias gritted his teeth. I hope they're fast learners. He grabbed a fallen enemy's weapon, dual-wielding as he sprayed fire across the room. 2 more jakar fell, but the commander himself stepped forward. dodging the shots with inhuman speed. The jakar leader lunged, his sharp claws aiming straight for Elias's throat. Elias barely dodged in time, feeling the air whoosh past his neck. He swung his rifle like a club, but the commander caught it mid-swing, snapping it in half with raw strength. Elias's heart pounded. This guy was stronger than the others. Mission complete, but at what cost? Done, Sailora shouted. The data upload finished, and a red signal flashed on the screen. The transmission was sent. But now, they had another problem. The entire base was on high alert. Sailora grabbed Elias's arm. We need to leave now. Elias ducked just as the jakar commander swung at him again, the claws barely missing his face. He rolled backward, grabbed a nearby smoke grenade, and threw it at the ground. PFFSSSHHH. Thick smoke filled the control room, blinding the enemy soldiers. Move, Elias shouted. They raced out of the control room, sprinting down the hallway as the alarm screamed through the base. Behind them, the commander's voice roared through the speakers. Seal the exits. Do not let them escape. Sailora tapped her communicator. Starwind, prep for emergency takeoff. The AI voice of her ship responded instantly. Acknowledged. Engines warming up. Escape under fire. As they ran through the corridors, jakar troops appeared from both sides, their blasters lighting up the passageway. Elias and Sailora returned fire, taking down enemy after enemy as they fought their way toward the hangar bay. Then the base shook violently. Elias stumbled. What was that? Sailora glanced at her wrist device. Her eyes widened. The Federation. They're already attacking. Outside, explosions ripped through the base, sending metal and fire raining down. The sky lit up as Federation warships descended from orbit, engaging the jakar defenses. But the dreadnought was still there, and its weapons were powering up. Elias grabbed Sailora's wrist. We can't let that ship launch. She hesitated, looking at the battlefield ahead. We don't have enough firepower to stop it. Elias's mind raced. Then he saw something. A row of fuel cells, stacked dangerously close to the dreadnought's launch platform. A slow grin spread across his face. We don't need firepower. We just need a really big explosion. Destroying the dreadnought. Sailora followed his gaze and grinned back. You're insane. Elias reloaded his plasma rifle. Always have been. They charged toward the fuel cells, dodging enemy fire as explosions rocked the hangar. Elias skidded to a stop, aiming carefully. He exhaled, steadied his hands, and fired. The shot hit the first fuel cell, igniting it instantly. A chain reaction followed. Boom! The explosion rippled across the platform, engulfing the dreadnought in a fiery storm. The ship shuddered, its structure breaking apart before it could leave the ground. The mighty warship, the jakar's greatest hope, was gone. The final escape. The shockwave sent Elias and Sailora flying. Elias hit the ground hard, coughing as smoke filled his lungs. We did it, he gasped. Sailora grabbed his arm. We need to go. The Starwind hovered above the wreckage, its ramp lowering. Elias and Sailora sprinted toward it, dodging falling debris as they leaped onto the ramp. The ship pulled up sharply, racing into the sky as the jakar base collapsed beneath them. Victory. For now. As they broke through the storm clouds, the Federation fleet moved in, securing the area. The jakar were defeated. For now. Elias collapsed into his seat, breathing heavily. That was too close. Sailora chuckled, shaking her head. You always this lucky. Elias smirked. You have no idea. Sailora looked out the window, her expression turning serious. The war isn't over, Elias. The jakar won't stop. Elias nodded. No, but today, we stopped them. Sailora met his gaze. So, what now? Elias leaned back, staring at the stars ahead. Now, we prepare, because next time, we finish this war. The end.